I still remember staring at a blank sheet of paper where I was supposed to be writing C code to start building my first neural net. That south part of your farm, you're never making money on. So why don't you just quit farming that land and turn that into pasture for your animals maybe, right? And then you're going to lose less money and maximize your profit. Each customer is going to go through this journey of show me, advise me, do it for me. At the turn of the 20th century, nearly half of the US population was employed by just one sector, and that's agriculture. Fast forward to now, it's less than 2%. And of course, not half the country is unemployed. New jobs were created. There's a category of work that's unimaginable previously to be done by humans that we should go after and apply AI to.
This is Prat Moghe with the AI Data Fabric Show. I'm super excited today to welcome to the show Mano Mannoochahr, who is a top 100 AI leader in the community. I'm super excited. Again, he's been a leader in some of the biggest places out there: Verizon, Travelers, GE, John Deere. Prolific in terms of his contributions to the community, things he's done as a data leader, AI leader, CIO. He's played multiple roles, hands-on as well as strategic. So I'm very excited and looking forward to the conversation, Manu, with you, so that we can get some of the lessons out for the aspiring leaders in the community. So thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. Great to be here. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. So, Manu, again, because your journey is, has so many different milestones, it's hard to cover everything in a short conversation. But anything like when you started this journey, where did you grow up, and what are some of the early influences, if you can touch on that? And then I'm very eager to dig into your work at a number of these places because I know they're all very different.
Yeah, great question to start with, Pratt. I think I'll borrow Steve Jobs' words, right? You cannot connect the dots looking forward, but I can certainly connect the dots looking back, what led to this. So I think my first foray with the computers was really right after I graduated high school. I had some time to kill. I was waiting for my results, of the exams and whatnot that we go through back in Pakistan. And also there was a period where I was applying to universities in US. And during that time, I ended up taking some programming classes just down the street from my house where we used to live, and just really started taking a liking to computers and programming. And I still remember my first language was Microsoft Basic that I learned, and then soon thereafter I learned COBOL. I don't try not to share that second part with anybody based on the demand for COBOL programmers that's out there, but that's kind of got me started. And of course then ended up going to undergrad at University of Kansas in computer engineering, and rest is history. So
awesome.
One data point that I think certainly I probably should mention is that in my master's work back in 93, 94 timeframe, I did a lot of neural networks and machine learning programming back then. And I think we were officially in an AI winter back in those mid-90s, right? So I'm not sure, what my advisor thought that I should pick that as a topic, but that certainly helped me get those real insights into, how neural nets and machine learning works. Because I still remember staring at a blank sheet of paper where I was supposed to be writing C code to start building my first neural net. Gotten a little easier these days, though.
That's right. All these kind of interesting random things are not that random. What is ironic is, my son goes to Dartmouth, and if you drive to Dartmouth, which is in New Hampshire, you come across a small obscure building on the right side. On the way, and it's basically where BASIC was first created, and there's a small little plaque there that sort of says, look, this is where BASIC was created.
Got
And then
it.
obviously what was interesting is the first AI term was also coined in a conference at Dartmouth, I think in the 50s.
Mm.
So, and then what is interesting is you mentioned COBOL. COBOL is hot again because
Of
there is a
course.
lot of work going on currently in some of the top
Yeah.
labs in terms of figuring out how to transform COBOL code into modern languages so
Sure.
that, and not just the code, but also the business logic, so that essentially you can transform all these applications on
Yeah.
mainframe and essentially make them more agentic. So I think all of these things kind of come back again
Yeah.
together.
Exactly.
So I know you again, you've been a leader in many large places where it's not easy to innovate. It's not easy to bring people together. It's certainly not easy when data is not well understood. And you were, I think, one of the pioneers in terms of like figuring out how to become a data leader and educate people on the value of data and using it to transform. Um, John Deere, I mean, 100 and what 75-year-old company.
Like that, maybe 180 now.
And Adi, you were there. Can you share some of the lessons from John Deere and also explain to some people on what John Deere does? Because not, again, let's not assume that everybody really knows the key products. So
Sure. Sure.
that would be great.
Yeah, so I think I spent majority of my career with John Deere, and so most of my professional learnings and lessons and whatnot came through that 17 plus years of tenure at the company. I would say that yeah, most people think of John Deere as maybe an agriculture equipment company, and which they certainly are. They're number one in the world. But certainly they have moved beyond equipment, and I think that kind of started back at just about maybe the time I had been there, and company was lucky as well. I was lucky to have some visionary leadership back in late '90s, early 2000s, where they believed in technology and what was going to happen from a precision agriculture perspective, right? And the demand for food was continue to go up, and the production of the world needed to double in the next 40 plus years to feed all the population of the world. And they started to invest in technology and precision agriculture uh, as early as I would say late 90s. And it was a company they acquired called Navcom, which allowed them to use GPS corrected signal to be able to pinpoint any part of the world up to like 2 centimeter accuracy. I mean, we're used to our GPS signals from our phones, right, that are about plus or minus 15, 20 feet accurate on a good day. But they were able to do that at a very, very high precision. And using that precision, we were able to then start connecting the work that the machines were doing to specific GPS locations. And of course, as more and more sensors made it into the machines, it really became quote unquote their factory in the field, right, so to speak. Because you're measuring every part of the process, sensors are giving you data, and one of my job became to get those machines connected back to the company and internet, so we could get insights from that data. So I think as part of that,
And massive amounts of data, right?
massive amounts of data, right? I mean, I think and of course I haven't been there in the last maybe 10 or so years, but I've heard that one pass in a season of a fleet of planters and whatnot can produce tens of petabytes of data, right, as it goes through and is planting seed and recording the downforce of the depth the seed went into, and of course thousands of seeds per acre are being, tens of thousands are being planted. So information about all those seeds, everything that's happening in the farm started to come back to us, and it was one of those learnings where we started to learn that hey, through this data you can now really start to marry not only the science of agronomy, which here's what the best practices are that help you deliver the best results, but also the experience of the farmers, the intuition that they have developed through their life of farming, and of course, then the database insights. So, this is back in, 2010, 12 timeframe when we started to get those insights into where the human intuition and experience and the science and the database insights will all have to coexist. Because that's really the only way for you to generate acceptance with the customers, right? Who believe in their intuitions, and which rightfully so, right? I mean, they've done that. But at the same time, each farmer customer has very limited amount of lifetime in terms of gaining those experiences, right? So if you think about, in fact, there's a book out there by Howard Buffett, Warren Buffett's brother, who was big into agriculture, big into deer, and owned farms and whatnot. So he published a book saying 40 chances. Basically said an average farmer has a chance, has 40 chances in their lifetime to get the crop cycle right, as in, from seeding to spraying to harvesting and then planting for the next year, right? So they don't have that ability to learn from mistakes and whatnot, right? Because you're only going to get 30 to 40 chances in your lifetime. So the goal was, how do we start to marry the database insights across thousands of customers, right, and bring those to their fingertips and whatnot. So I think it was very early learning that, hey, these have to coexist, and I know we're going to maybe get into that topic as well later on as we talk about agentic AI and whatnot. But that was even a couple of decades ago the topic of discussion.
It's super interesting. Can you share maybe one or two insights that when you get all of this, like you said, it's insights plus intuition plus the science.
I mean,
what was like a non-obvious or very interesting?
I think if I recall correctly, the stuff is 15, 16 years old in my mind. But there was a time where, as you can imagine, farmers are trying to maximize their profits, right? Yeah. And of course, they're trying to manage their costs and whatnot. But at the same time, if they don't have visibility into field by field in their large farm, they might be farming 20, 30, 40,000 acres, that they're not going to see where they're making more money versus less, where the cost of input exceeds the revenue that they get from that part of the farm, right? So when we started to get these database insights, it was those aha moments like, oh, wait a minute, that south part of your farm, you're never making money on. So why don't you just quit farming that land and turn that into pasture for your animals maybe, right? And then you're going to lose less money and maximize your profit, right? So there's those counterintuitive insights where they may be trying harder and harder to get, more yield out of that part, but for whatever reason, data is telling you that you're not making money, so maybe move on and find a different use for it.
Interesting. So you were kind of, in some sense, the data allowed you to partner with these customers in kind of sort of building a longer-term relationship, I'm assuming, right? Because
exactly, right? I mean, as they were going to start gaining the trust in the data, right? And I think we had a saying where it basically said, hey, each customer is going to go through this journey of show me, advise me, do it for me, right? As far from an automation perspective, which, by the way, 2 decades later still holds true, right? As we were talking about agentic AI, where
forward deployed engineer is the one that's actually doing it.
Exactly, right? Where show me as in show me the data and let me make the decisions. Advise me as in I will take your advice, but I'll still decide, right? But then do it for me when they start to trust the data and advice. Maybe they'll push the button saying, hey, why don't you do this scenario for me next time anyway, on your own? And I think that's certainly where we're going to see, the journey AI is going to go through as well. So.
And I remember another interesting thing that you shared with me around this thing is, all those insights also help optimize the product.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes.
Which is very interesting. Yeah. Right? Can you share that?
Yeah, definitely. So certainly, we were creating value for the end customers through maximizing the outcomes for them. But at the same time, I took on a different role in the company where I went to a corporate role where the goal was to apply this data to improve the company operations as well, in addition to, of course, creating value and tools for the end customers. And certainly, as you can imagine, from a predictive maintenance perspective, from parts and service, availability, matching that to what we were seeing from the fleet of equipment, right, in terms of type of problems, type of issues. And I remember there were, lots of scenarios where, in the past, a problem in the field, with it maybe a new model or new update, right? It may have taken us months, to learn what the issue was, and then of course correct that issue from more machines being able to go into the field. I think I remember there was a distinctive issue where machines had issue with park brake, right, as in staying in park and whatnot, and Deere was able to see the alerts related to that and take quick action within weeks, and of course keep the issue from becoming bigger even, right?
Yeah.
I think it was dozens of examples like that basically how the data could be used to improve the company's own operations, whether it was engineering, whether it's supply chain, whether it was parts and service. And I think there were a number of insights, as in, hey, what's the optimal size of a fuel tank, right? How much fuel gets used in a day versus in a week or whatever, right? And maybe there's some accesses there that needed to be corrected and save some costs. So there was just dozens of examples like that over the years.
Manu, I got to obviously ask you this question on, as we are approaching the agentic world, and you're sitting from the vantage point of a chief AI officer, data officer, sort of looking at the C-suite, looking at the CEOs and the boards now thinking about what does this mean? What does this mean for enterprises in terms of challenges and opportunities? What does it mean for the people, where there's a lot of anxiety about displacement and skilling? Sort of give us your take. Like, are you bullish? Are you bearish? I know you've kind of taken some lessons from your past history, which I found super interesting. So
Yeah.
you can
Definitely.
share those with the community.
Yeah, I would say from my perspective, just being a little more optimistic person by design, I'm pretty bullish on the power of it versus the bearish scenarios that get thrown out, right? And maybe I can share a few data points, and then we can talk about what this may look like. I think one, of course, going back to again my roots in the agriculture industry. At the turn of the 20th century, right, early 1900s, nearly half of the U.S. population was employed by just one sector, and that's agriculture. So as automation and tractors started to come along, there was this fear that, hey, if farming gets automated, and now, of course, tractors are doing the work versus humans and cattle and whatnot, right, that the U.S. is going to have joblessness, and that was the prevailing view, 120 some years ago, right? But fast forward to now, I think the latest stats in terms of the agriculture employment in U.S. is less than 2%. I think it's like 1.5, 1.6% of U.S. jobs now are in the agriculture sector. So now you've gone from over 50% 100 years ago to less than 2%, and of course not half the country is unemployed, right? So I think even though the technology came along, automation came along, and but new jobs were created. In fact, let me give you another stat. I heard this last year at some point that Department of Labor says, U.S. Department of Labor, that 60% of the jobs that exist right now didn't exist more than 25 years ago. So over the last 25 years, more than half of the jobs are new that never existed before, right? And certainly the speed of that is starting to change, and you're going to see even more and more newer jobs being created, and maybe certainly there will be some job destruction that will happen at the low end. But at the same time, I think the technology creates more opportunity than it takes away, is kind of how I think about it. And so anyway, I think AI and humans are going to coexist. I think there's plenty of data points that point to the fact that AI actually makes people stronger, not weaker. I think there will be fewer and fewer deeper. The deeper knowledge will have to be possessed by fewer and fewer people as applications of knowledge are going to become even more from an innovation perspective. And I think maybe there's another data point, Prat, I can share, which is if you look at the game of chess and the grandmasters that exist today, right now, the highest levels of grandmasters in the history of humankind exist right now than they have ever existed, in terms of their ranking and their levels, right? And the hypothesis actually at least goes that, hey, the reason why you have so many grandmasters that their highest level ever, right? That is because this is the generation that grew up playing chess against computer AI, right? And got trained on that and have now learned how to get even better than any of the grandmasters in the history. So anyway, I think those three data points at least speak to the fact that I think, we will survive and we will evolve and we'll figure out a way to continue to grow.
Yeah, yeah. And what does this mean for the role of a CAIO, CDAIO, whatever you sort of think of that acronym?
Yeah.
What's in your view, what are the sort of the three things that are keys to success, Manu?
Yeah, certainly. I think, the role has continued to evolve faster than probably any other role, right, that have existed in the technology space. And I think, obviously went from kind of defensive governance oriented to technology and cloud and modernization oriented to now, of course, over the last 5 years, it's become really more forward facing as in driver of innovation and transformation, right, for the companies. And I think from my perspective, this is the time for this C-suite role to start really collaborating with the business leaders and figure out how data can be used to optimize the business that we have, and of course transform the business over time, right? Because I do think that through these AI tools, through data-based insights, there's a lot of opportunity to just optimize the performance of the current business. But then, of course, using AI, agentic AI, and opportunities for automation and more intelligence to improve outcomes, right? That's where the transformation comes in. And I think that, of course, what you got to be careful there is that, of course, you don't fall in the trap of, paving the cow paths, right, so to speak, as in, not changing the way work gets done and trying to automate the work that as exists now, because that's a recipe for disaster. So you got to figure out what are those selective few areas that you should transform that are critical to the company, what can generate value for the bottom line, and then really go after it, right? And I think it's all about the partnership aligning the outcomes that you want to go after and improve, and then of course delivering on it.
Awesome. Very much appreciate. Any other parting words for the community?
I think maybe one area as we were talking about this topic, right? I do think that most people maybe get too indexed on, hey, how will AI and humans coexist, and what are the type of work that AI agents will take on versus the humans, right? And certainly there's a whole spectrum of possibilities from frontline repetitive work that AI can assist and automate and take on to higher end knowledge work, right, that typically exists at the corporate offices and whatnot, how that can be augmented. I think there's another category of work, Prat, that I think most people don't think about right away, which is AI is just uniquely positioned to do a type of work that humans could never do or should never do, right? I think work that can be done at scale that requires some intelligence and has variations that AI is uniquely positioned. So I think there's a category of work that's unimaginable previously to be done by humans that we should go after and apply AI to. Certainly, there's lots of examples that came through in my career, including as recently as Verizon, right? If you think about, as every carrier has some customer churn and risk models, right? That help you understand who are the customers at risk. But given how many may fall into that, it could be millions, right? In terms of they have some kind of a risk. Question is, what can you do about it, right? I mean, you can't have people make millions of calls all the time, trying to reach customers, right? But maybe there's a role for AI to play there, right? So I think those are type of things where there's a type of work that we just couldn't do in the past at human scale. So how can we do it at AI scale?
So it's both the breadth and the depth problem, which is huge,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
hyper targeting at the same time.
Exactly, right? Because AI is just getting so good at being
Yeah.
have conversations in a very empathetic way, right? Sometimes even better than some maybe not so well trained humans who may be having a bad day.
That's
So,
right.
like, how can you have leverage AI for something like that? So,
And I'm guessing in those examples, you could train it so that even if there is some hallucination and things are messed up, you're essentially you're looking at the cost of that error and saying, look, that's fine because I can make up for it by
correct, correct.
maybe you're giving somebody an additional reward or whatever it is to keep them, and maybe that's fine as long as you don't penalize people. Like maybe that's
Yeah, yeah. I
total
mean,
cost.
cost of making an AI call, is essentially zero, right,
Zero.
compared to
That's right.
humans trying to make
Yeah.
calls. So,
Yeah, fascinating. Awesome. This was a great conversation, Manu, and I know now you're on to the next thing. I'm guessing you're spending time looking at a variety of options. Any comments on what's interesting going forward now?
well, yeah, that's interesting. Maybe not for the wider consumption, but I'm certainly evaluating a lot of different options and trying to see what's really interesting out there. And so I've got a few irons in the fire, so to speak. We'll see
I
where
think I think any place would be lucky to have you. And again, thanks for sharing your observations and things from the experience with everybody. Thanks again, Manu.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it. All right. Thank you, Brett.